Hello, I'm Phil Svitek, 360 Creative Coach. In this episode, I want to kind of talk about the podcast industry as a whole. Now, not everything in terms of the podcast industry, but a specific thing within the whole of the podcast space. Before I do, though, I want to encourage you to subscribe if you haven't already done so. That way you get all the various episodes and lessons that I put out right when I put them out. Thank you if you just did, and sincerely appreciate you if you already were. So let's get into it. What the heck am I talking about? Well, ever since I can remember, and I've been in the podcast space at this point going on 11 years, we've always talked about metrics. And, because in order to be able to make this space viable for advertisers and revenue to podcasters and companies, we need to trust the metrics that are in front of us. And there was different methodology and so forth. And finally, the IAB, which is the Internet Advertising Bureau, got involved, and they created a set of standards. And that was the standard. And then it's kind of been updated, throughout. And by the way, when I say created a standard, this was 30 or so podcast companies, maybe more, got together, created a standard, and they've continually been, updating and whatever else, and essentially fighting over the smallest words, so that way we can have an accurate representation and have a standard for this business. Because you can't have one company measuring one way and another measuring another way, and going to advertising firms and asking them for money, and it's well, how the hell do you measure it, right? There needs to be a standard. And right now the standard is based on a download, okay? So, and how that download is defined is very, very, very detailed, okay? And like I said, when I say 30 people, I mean 30 companies, each representing a different company, really fought to kind of get at this list, and it's going to be continually upgraded. Just because, we have to respond to things that are happening, IPv6, right? That's going to be coming out, and so we're going to need to update based on that. But the real crux of this is that the aim is to have a standard measurement for podcasts, so that way people know their downloads. People can compare of okay, how much, if I tell you, let's say my company's getting 1 million downloads every single day. And it's well, my company's getting 2 billion downloads every single day. And it's okay, well, if we're measuring based on two different things, then we don't know, right? But if we have the same measurement, now we can compare and contrast, right? So that's the idea. And again, it goes to advertisers, and then they can, decide and put money forward towards shows and so forth. So it's to level the playing field and to invite opportunity from advertisers, because now they can feel comfortable, A, with the numbers, and B, that there's a set standard everywhere, right? So there's that. Now, the way this works, and ultimately what I want to talk about today, is IAB compliance. Because there are a lot of companies that will say they are IAB compliant. But that's not necessarily true, because in order, you have to get certified to be compliant. And the certification costs a lot of money, and it takes a lot of time. They essentially open up the hood of whatever company and go through it and make sure that you are, in fact, compliant. And then when you are compliant, they certify you. But a lot of companies will say they are IAB compliant without having done the certification. But they can't be compliant, because what they're trying to say is that they've read the rules and they're adhering to the rules. But what they don't want is to have to pay a fee, the cost of doing business, to then be verified and say oh yeah, you are in fact doing it correctly. Now you could say, well, if they're following the rules, then just let them be and whatever else. And why we have to be a stickler for the rules? Well, we have to be a stickler for the rules because we have fought to get to this point. Again, 30 companies, 30 people of these companies representing each, fighting tooth and nail to get to this point so that way we can have this standard so advertisers take us seriously. And when you just say you're compliant, it kind of devalues what we're aiming to do, and it lowers the entire industry. And that's not good, right? Furthermore, case after case after case, every pretty much company that has said that they are IAB compliant, as soon as they go through the verification, they take a haircut, meaning that what they were reporting ended up being lower. And it sucks. It sucks to, be like, oh, we're getting 2 million downloads when in reality you're getting like 1.7 or possibly 1. But in that sense, if you aren't measuring correctly, you can't make the correct adjustments to bring that number up. And certainly, you're not going to get the advertising that you want. And in fact, you're cheating advertisers by just throwing out this number. And so this is kind of what's happening within our space. I wanted to talk about it. It's kind of insider baseball type of information, but if you're in the marketing side, be wary of someone who's IAB compliant. If you're a podcaster, be wary of that because, this applies more so to podcasters who, essentially podcast for a living, and this is where their money's coming from. But you may get to a point where like you're taking all this money and all of a sudden, the longer they defer of not actually becoming IAB certified and just saying they're IAB compliant, then there could come a day where the advertiser is like, wait. You've been ripping us off for the past year and a half. We want that money back. And guess whose pocket it is coming out of? Yours, right? Because you were the one being paid that money, and all of a sudden you got to give back like however large amount of money. That's not good. So, the IAB certification is designed to avoid this. It's to standardize the industry. We need that across the board. So, do yourself a favor. And even if you're not, podcasting for a living, I'm certainly not in terms of doing this series. But nonetheless, it is important for the space and it is important to fight because, even for yourself, like, wouldn't you want to know what your real numbers are or what the numbers are based on the standard of the industry versus just some arbitrary numbers on someone else's measurement? What gets measured can be accounted for and can be adjusted, meaning you can make the necessary changes. So do yourself a favor and put pressure on your podcast hosting provider if they're not IAB certified, right? They can tell you they're IAB compliant, but that's not good enough. IAB certified. So that's what I have for you today. If you have any questions, I know this is, as I said, insider baseball, but if you have any questions, comment down below or hit me up on social media. Also, feel free to offer up your 2 cents on this whole issue. Would love to hear from you. And kind of for more about this, you can check out New Media Show. It's a podcast hosted by Blueberry's Todd Cochran and Libsyn's Rob Greenlee. I have been listening to them for a number of years, and it is how I stay up to date on a lot of things going on in the industry, so I can't say enough good things about it. I encourage you to deep dive there as well. They've been in the podcast game since pretty much day one, and so they have a wealth of information, and I always learn a lot, and I know you will too. So that's what I have for you. Thank you, and I hope to see you